Have you been preparing to die? Is that like a thought that you've had at your young age? I was listening to a program on 60 Minutes once, and they were interviewing these monks at Mount Athos, which is a peninsula in Greece. And the 60 Minutes interviewer said, what do you do here all day long? And they pick oranges and other fruits, of course, olives. But the answer was, we are preparing to die. And the announcer from 60 Minutes really didn't know what to do with that. Like, wow, should I be happy? Are you preparing to die? Well, the gospel today has something about death. You know, I think it's something in our human nature that wants to overcome death. And we can look at other religions and what do they do? We can ask, well, the Buddhists, for example, they try to overcome by death by talking about nirvana. If we can become one with the cosmos, we overcome death, suffering. The ancient Jews thought, well, we live on in our ancestors. That's the way we'll overcome death. Hindus talk about reincarnation. You can overcome death by becoming a grasshopper or something else, I don't know. Of course, if you go lower, you're worse, you're a lower animal. If you're better, you're a higher animal. But it just seems that it's in human nature to want to overcome death. What about Christianity? What does Christianity say about death? The first thing Christians say about death for humans is death entered the world because of sin. It actually wasn't supposed to be for humanity. Okay? Evolutionists, strict evolutionists will say death is part of life. Must be the case that God would have wanted humans to die. But no, for Christians we believe that God's plan originally for Adam and Eve and all who followed was to live eternally and not die. And so sin came through death. Death came through sin. Well, sin is death. You know, I heard the other day there's this woman named Louisa Pecoretta, and she is somewhat a mystic. She's dead now, but she actually spoke about Adam, and she said something that's really fascinating to me. She said Adam only sinned once. It was the one time eating the apple. And after that, in his life, this mystic said he did not sin again. I thought, wow. Do you know that the church has a feast day for Adam and Eve? And do you know what day it is? You know? December 24th, the day before Christmas. The new Adam who comes to save humanity, but the church's faith tradition is Adam did go on to live something of a holy life. If you go to Jerusalem, and you go to the Holy Sepulchre where Jesus died and was buried, it's just 30 yards apart. Where he died on Golgotha is about 15 to 20 feet up above the ground, and where he's buried is just 30 yards away. Well, underneath that Mount Golgotha, there's a little plaque on the wall of this little mount, and there is a theory that Adam was buried there. And you'll see that little plaque if you go to Jerusalem into the Holy Sepulchre. Just right around the corner. And so we say as Christians that death entered the world through sin. Number two, we look at death as a kind of like baptism. Now when we're baptized, we go under water and we close our eyes and it's dark, right? We plug our nose and we can't breathe under there. It's a kind of like a death, a darkness, like a tomb. And so we flip it and say, well, death is kind of like baptism too. We can be purged through it. We can be cleansed through it. Now, I read something else that's really beautiful from Father Raniero Cantalamessa. You know him? He's the preacher of the papal household. And he was asking the question, why did Jesus die? Jesus had no sin. Why did he enter into that state and that experience that we have? And here's the beautiful answer he gave. He said, Jesus entered death so that it could be inhabited by love. I thought, wow, that is so beautiful. I was practically crying when I read it. so that death could be inhabited by love. And that's the goal in our spiritual life. In all the little and the big ways that we can die now to the flesh, to selfishness, to pride, so that it can be inhabited. We can be inhabited by love. For example, maybe in the cafeteria, you're really hungry. And there's a lot of people want to go through the line you want to go through. I don't know what line it is, the pizza line, whatever it is. And you say, despite your hunger, I'll let that person go first. I'll die to my little pushiness. Okay? Or maybe it's, I feel tired right now, and yet I know I should say some prayers because I've been undergoing temptation, and I want the Lord to rule in my life. And so you die and say, I'm not going to do something slothful. I'm going to do my little prayers. I'm going to give that up. I'll make a little sacrifice. There's some people here who are married and have children, and they know what it's like to die at 2 a.m. to get up and take care of those kids when they would rather just sleep. In fact, every vocation involves a kind of healthy dying to self. Lazarus was brought back to life in the gospel. And another thing that Christians say about death is that it's sleeping. Jesus said he is asleep. Because people who sleep rise, and Christians who die rise. If you read some of the tracts of history, it was also stated that Lazarus experienced some persecution after that. You would think the whole village of Jerusalem would be rejoicing. Wow, you were dead and now you're alive. But in fact, he was also persecuted. You're now a follower of that man, Jesus? So, talking about death and a Christian perspective on death, are you preparing to die? Well, you're very young to be thinking about death and the long-term destiny. But you're old enough to say, I know I need to die to my pride, to my flesh, to my selfishness and my vanity. And Jesus says, I entered death that it would be inhabited by love. May the rest of this Lent continue to be an experience of some healthy dying inhabited by the love of God.